Hello and welcome to the Tampering Podcast, part of the Athletic NBA Show Network. I'm Sam Amick, NBA national writer at The Athletic, here with Fred Katz, who, as he knows, the other day I ran into one Bradley Beal of the Phoenix Suns, and I just decided that since Fred covered Brad for a long time, and I don't really know Brad, I would introduce myself to Mr. Beal as Fred Katz's co-worker. So I think heretofore, Fred, you think it should stick? Should this be my new title, Fred Katz's coworker? How do we feel about this?
I think it's a bad look for both of us, to be honest. I don't think I need you walking up to Brad and associating yourself with me, and I don't think anybody.
Damn.
I don't think it's going to be a good look. I don't think it's going to be a good look for you either.
All right.
Where if you're going around being like, that's the guy, that's the colleague who I choose to associate myself with, that's going to go really poorly. I made two not safe for the podcast jokes in the 3 minutes that we led leading into this thing. Like, you don't want to be associated with me. Something bad's going to happen to me.
Thank you for the professional advice. That's very true. You were on some NC-17 stuff at the jump here. We are back. Good episode of Tampering this week. I will at least be Fred Katz's, podcast co-host. We are going to be joined by a handful of people in a little bit. We're going to talk Knicks at the jump here because, man, the OG Anunoby era is going quite well. We're going to be joined by William Liu, host of the Raptors show on Sportsnet, to talk all things Raptors, not only the team as it's currently constructed, but obviously in the news with the trade deadline coming up, all things Pascal Siakam, who I wrote about the other day. It doesn't stop there, people. We got Law Murray, Clippers beat writer, joining us to talk about the new super team in LA, not the purple and gold one. There's only one down there. And then last and definitely not least, John Krasinski to talk some Minnesota Timberwolves. Losses don't get more impressive than the overtime one they had against Boston last night. They still look good. They seem to be a contender. Fred, let's talk Knicks, brother. This team that you've covered for a fair amount of time now is looking very nice after this trade. Anunoby fitting in quite well. We talk a little bit about it each week, but let's dive in a little more. What's the latest sense on that front of how well this has panned out?
I mean, it looks like it's just going to pan out wonderfully for both sides. It's going to be one of those rare NBA trades that we looked at the time and we're like, that works out great for both. And we're going to look back on and think that worked out great for both. I really think that's where this is headed. The Knicks have not lost a game since acquiring OG Anunoby. They're 5-0. We're recording this Thursday morning Pacific time. They have Dallas on Thursday night. That's a tough matchup on the road. We'll see how that goes. But it's not like they're beating down nobodies here, and it's not like they're barely scratching out wins. They're 5-0 since getting OG Anunoby. They beat Minnesota, who has had the best record in the West at the time and has the best record in the West now. In that first game, they took care of business against Chicago with a 16-point win. Then they go down to Philadelphia, and they demolish the 76ers in Philadelphia on national TV. That was a Sixers squad at full strength. They win that game by 36. And they just manhandled them. They just wrecked them. And that's when it was like, oh, wow, is this team, we knew they were good, but is this team really good? Next night, they crush the Wizards in Washington, and then they come home and they just destroy the Portland Trailblazers by 28 in the game. They led by 30-something at different points, and we're basically on cruise control from 5 minutes into the game. They look really good on both sides of the ball. It sounds like there is a possibility that Mitchell Robinson could be coming back this season now, which just adds more depth for them at the center position. Backup center has been a problem. Isaiah Hartenstein has stepped in at starting center and been fantastic in that starting job, but the backup minutes have been a problem. If you get a healthy Mitchell Robinson back before the end of the year, you're playing 48 minutes with a legitimately good rim protector and really good center play. Now all of a sudden, like you're cooking with gas, and I think they might have a trade in them before the deadline, something to help them on the margins too. So, and this team is really, really firing on all cylinders right now.
So I'm going to take your lead there. You mentioned the trade deadline and help around the margins. You already kind of answered my next question, which is, are you leaning now towards against the idea of another high profile splash and more likely something that is complementary? I mean, OG is about as complementary as it gets, and that's obviously worked really well. You see more of the same in that regard?
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as high profile as Anunoby.
Right.
I've said since the beginning of the year that the Knicks front office has been of the belief that obviously they have been in the market for a star, and obviously that's what they are saving all these draft picks up for. They own all of their own picks. They own 4 protected picks from other teams, and they could trade up to 4 unprotected picks and 3 unprotected swaps in a trade if they wanted to do it. But the Knicks front office has been of the belief all season that next huge fish, the big megastar who they're after, it's not going to become available till next summer at the earliest, is their belief. I think they have another trade in them before the deadline, though, something that could maybe bring them a little bit more offense off the bench. Ironically, kind of what they lost with Emmanuel quickly. Quentin Grimes has stepped up, done a good job. Miles McBride has joined the rotation and has gotten hot a couple of times, but McBride's offense is still a question mark, even though he is starting to erase that question mark a little bit with the way that he's been hitting threes lately. But they struggle to score still without Jalen Brunson on the floor. They could use somebody who can create some more offense there. I could see them going in that direction. I could see them making a trade kind of sort of like that.
I like it. I will share, because you mentioned the win-win component of this deal. And this is the fun part about hitting the road and actually seeing people outside of your market. I go to LA this past week, Sunday through Wednesday, catch the Clippers Raptors game. And again, we're going to talk all things Raps with William Liu here in a little bit. But Bobby Webster, Raptors GM, used the exact phrase in our brief chat sideline that you did. I mean, he feels like this is a win-win for both sides. And it looks like the Knicks are dangerous. The Philly game you mentioned, Fred, I know I'm hitting the rewind button a little bit. If we're talking big fish, and we're talking big fish who are not available, pretty good timing on their part to give Mr. Joel Embiid a minus 29 and a 128-92 Knicks win. Does he, do you think, remain the absolute dream scenario when it comes to them, continuing to keep an eye on that market?
Sure. Emphasis on dream. Yeah. Dream scenario. I don't think anybody is anticipating that Embiid is going to all of a sudden pop up and be available. I don't think that's necessarily.
I mean, it's going well, but I will say we sometimes forget in January how much things can change. And this is very, very premature. But if they absolutely, wet the bed, so to speak, in the first round and got bounced and things weren't looking good, and maybe the Maxey discussions don't go as well contract wise, whatever, we'll see what happens. But that obviously, for the Knicks purposes, Embiid and beyond, the exciting thing for them and their fans is now all of a sudden the possibilities seem endless. You are a place of desire for players, a place that is doing good things and lighting the garden up, and that's always been the thing. All these years of awful basketball, it's been the what if, for the past 20 years roughly, of if the juice would be back in the building, and it appears to be right now.
Yeah, and can I just add something?
Yeah.
Every Knicks conversation goes to, okay, well then who's the star? Who's the star they're going to get? I think it's important that we concentrate on the guys who are there right now. This team could make a conference finals run.
Like Tibbs right now.
Well, yeah, I do. I spend a lot of time with him. Too much time. Tibbs would say I spend too much time around him. I'll tell you that much. He's not going around being like, yeah, I'm the guy who works with Fred Katz. I promise you that. But I really mean it. Like, they just annihilated the 76ers. Boston's clearly the best team in the East, no question. But they just annihilated the 76ers. The Bucks are not infallible. They struggle defensively. The transition defense remains a mess. They don't have a perimeter stopper. And even though they've won 3 out of 4 games against the Knicks this year, I actually think the Knicks match up against them quite well. Milwaukee doesn't have anybody who can guard Jalen Brunson one-on-one. And Brunson has had games where he's torched them. And their only option is really to put Giannis on Julius Randle, which displaces the way that they ideally like to use Giannis defensively, which is as more of a weak side help defender and somebody to wall down the paint. They also have a lot of guys who are really good at floaters. They also have a lot of good jump shooters now who are going to be able to kind of break down where Milwaukee's number one defensive strength is, which is the paint defense. I could see them beating Milwaukee in a series. They just destroyed the 76ers.
Oh, I could too. 100%.
It is not insane to talk about this team as just a having a chance to go to the conference finals as constituted without any other moves.
I mean, if you put it that way, Freddie, Maddie, whatever we're calling you these days, it's not insane to put them in the NBA finals. If that's the way you're framing it, it's not, because the Milwaukee thing you mentioned, I couldn't agree with more. And Boston is incredible. But track record of coming just short, obviously about as close as you can get in the finals against the Warriors. But if not insane is the framing, I'm fine putting the Knicks as a finals contender, because the East is it's just there's imperfections abound for the most part.
Is a very good team as constituted. I think you can make an argument right now they're the second best team in the East as constituted. They have a starting lineup that makes a ton of sense. OG Anunoby in his first 5 games with the Knicks is plus 115. He does everything for them defensively now. That first game that he played was such a perfect example of what he's doing for them, because what his presence is, it's not just his personal production. It's the way that he kind of knocks everybody down a peg. So previously that starting lineup, it just didn't make a ton of sense, where RJ Barrett was not complimentary with Julius Randle and not complimentary with Jalen Brunson. These are guys who are at their best when they're inside the 3-point arc. They're the guys who are at their best when they're with the ball, And if RJ Barrett is at his best when he has the ball, but the Knicks are not at their best when he has the ball, that's when you have a problem with fit. That's when you have some sort of conflicting issues. And that's what was going on with them. And it's not a knock on Barrett. It's not a knock on Quickly. It's just a stylistic reality of what was going on with this team for years and years. You bring in Anunoby, his cutting is opening so much stuff up on offense. The fact that he's a 44% corner 3-point shooter is opening so much stuff on offense. They defensively look like a different animal when they have Anunoby out there. They're playing with a different energy. The bench is getting out in transition. Like, this is a team, I think you could say they're as good as second best in the East right now. And I think the lowest you could put them is 5th. If you want to put Milwaukee, obviously Boston, Philadelphia, and if you just want to throw Miami there because it's the Heat and we don't need to say any more, then that's obviously completely justifiable. But this is a team that's legitimately really good, and I think is in that second tier of Eastern Conference teams right now. And I'm very curious to see where they go from here.
Good stuff, Fred. Appreciate you. We're going to pivot here, and we're going to bring in first guest of the day, a gentleman who I have not met, and I'm very excited to have on the show, William Liu. How are you, sir? Host of the Raptors show on Sportsnet, co-worker of our friend and old buddy Blake Murphy out in that part of the world. What's up, sir? How are you?
I'm good. What's going on? Blake wasn't available for this reunion, or what?
Oh, no, we bring a new blood in. You know what I mean? No, I appreciate you coming on. Your timing's great. We were kind of planning the show this week. Super producer Andrew Schlecht mentioned the idea of bringing you on, and the timing for me was perfect because I was in LA last couple days, Raptors catching the Lakers and the Clippers. So William, Fred had just broken down all things Knicks when it comes to this trade. I'm very curious to get your perspective, I guess 10 days out roughly, about what it means and how it works for the Raptors, and then obviously where they're going. But quick color on my side, I mentioned to Fred catching up with Bobby Webster a little bit in LA, and he, like Fred, had used the phrase win-win for the trade. RJ Barrett's obviously playing pretty well, quickly doing good things, but they got a lot more decisions to make. I guess I'll start with this. Just, what was your reaction to the deal at the time, and how do you feel like it has worked for that squad so far?
Yeah, my reaction at the time was just, this is a Raptors team that needed a change. Like, literally the night of that trade, they lost to the Pistons. And if not for that loss, the Pistons would be on a 34-game losing streak right now. It would be the biggest story in sports. But yeah, the Raptors needed a change. The group just wasn't really clicking. Offensively, it's been a drag to see the Raptors play for the last pretty much 3 years. They've been getting by, grinding results with Nick Nurse and playing a frenetic style. But it wasn't sustainable. It was like 40 minutes a night for their top guys, and they weren't even, there was no chance really to even get to past the first round, for example, with that group. So a change needed to be made. And they brought in 2 players who offensively have been a much better fit. I know that RJ in New York wasn't super efficient, took a lot of contested shots, and just overall wasn't a great fit But I think coming to Toronto, it's really refreshed things. Both him and Quickly have talked about it's a different system. They move the ball a lot better in Toronto. And whatever, obviously New York is more successful as a team, but it's just a different style of play. And both guys have hit the ground running. If anything, RJ, even though the deal was centered and largely hyped around Emmanuel Quickly, RJ is the guy who's actually hit the ground running first. And he's had just a number of really efficient, but just awesome kind of like complete performances. And for him, it's really just about, almost as being like a third, fourth option with the Raptors right now. There's a lot of good ball movement, and he's just attacking off of catches. He's not shooting mid-rangers nearly as much. He's obviously on a hot streak from three, but he's finding ways to contribute. And I think overall for the Raptors, they needed two more guys in the starting lineup who can create some more offense. All of a sudden, when they're healthy, they now have four guys who can attack and create. So it's created for a better offense. It just hasn't translated to wins yet because they've had a terrible road trip right now of like playing the two games in LA, which is never easy. And even the game they lost to the Kings hit 21 threes. So, but in general, the team just looks a lot more cohesive. Defensively, there's a lot to figure out though. You lose OG, you lose a lot of your defense.
I'm curious to know on the Quickly front. I mean, the vibe in New York was always, if he gets to another situation, he's blocked by Jalen Brunson. If he gets to another situation, he's going to find a way to break out. If he gets an opportunity to start, he's going to break out. He's had some really good moments so far. I actually still think he has another gear from what he's shown so far in Toronto. What are the first impressions on him so far, especially as a guy kind of at the top of your offense, running an offense, not just as a scorer, because that's a different role for him than what he was in before, right?
Yeah, totally. There was a game recently where Quickly had like 10 assists and I don't think he cracked 10 points. And I think the scouting report coming in from him was he was going to be a combo guard. He's going to score a lot, but I think he is relishing the new role of, being the starting point guard, having to set up other scorers on the team. And he's kind of finding spots to fit in. Weirdly enough, right now, he's not finishing strong at the basket. He's looked more and more comfortable just in general, but I think there is still more to be done for him to get to the rim a little bit more. But the three-point shooting, both on and off the ball, has been something that the Raptors have really missed. You lose Fred VanVleet in the offseason as well. You bring in Dennis Schroeder, who has his own skill set, but it's not, pull-up shooting. It's not off-ball shooting. Quickly has come in and slotted in more comfortably when he's playing off the ball, I feel like. But yeah, I agree with you. There is sort of, this sense that he can give even more because you've seen him flash both sides. One side of it being more of the floor general and the other side of it being more of an off-ball kind of scorer. And you saw last night, I mean, when the Raptors were down against the Clippers in the fourth quarter, and I mean, they're obviously humming, and it's Kawhi and it's Paul George and it's James Harden. Somebody's got to score for you. Like someone's got to take over. And it was Quickly's first time in the fourth quarter last night taking over and scoring 10 points in the fourth quarter for the Raptors. That wasn't enough to get the win, but I thought Quickly really asserted himself and found a good balance last night. So yeah, I mean, there is definitely a starting potential there. It's just getting comfortable to that role.
William, let me shift it a little bit to the kind of the dude who's front and center right now. Pascal Siakam pregame against the Lakers. I love this because it was one of the more colorful kind of pregame scenes that I've seen in a while, where he's doing his thing, and he got a long workout, man. He was out there for a while, and you got agents, front office folks, media members, sideline, just absolutely jam packed at Crypto.com Arena watching Pascal. It wasn't quite on the Steph Curry levels when he goes out and does his thing and everybody wants to watch, but it felt very strange because everybody, or at least it felt this way, courtside, was talking about Pascal. I think he had the earbuds in, so I don't think he was eavesdropping, but it was just a hilarious vibe because you're watching this guy do his thing, and then everyone wants to know where is this heading? What is going to happen? It's a pretty, for me, even a pretty unique dynamic when you talk about a guy who is making it clear and his associates that, the talks with the Raptors, at least on their side would prefer they continue, that the extension is something that they, financially, economically, and he has not asked out, that pathway remains open. Then you've got a trade market where, I think Masai Ujiri is looking at this like, how can I obviously juice it up and not have it be as underwhelming as it appears to have been. The Kings certainly engaged pretty seriously last week. Indiana gets mentioned, Golden State, a bunch of teams. But you're a lot more close to it. What do you think here in terms of where this is headed for Pascal?
My personal sense of it is that if they wanted to extend Pascal, they would have done it already. They've had ample opportunity. Even if they wanted to extend Pascal to preserve the value of Pascal in a potential trade.
That's it right there, by the way. That's the only inference I was making. That's the only reasoning for them to do it.
No, I mean, they would have done that last summer, because then all of a sudden you would have guarantees on his deal. He'd be under contract if they extended him last year around the time of the draft. Then he would be available to trade by this trade deadline. And, if you're trying to deal with a team, like Indiana or Detroit, who probably don't have assurances from Pascal's side that if we get traded here, we'll extend with this organization, you take that off the table if you've already extended him last summer. So
right.
I think for the team, like, they're trying to see what they can get value wise. Maybe they can go back after all of this and try to put all the cans back in the worm, or the worms back in the can, and just say, like, yeah, you know what, Pascal, we tried to trade you, but there weren't any good deals out there. How about an extension? It's not exactly a great proposal at that point, but still, I do think that there's a genuine interest for Pascal to remain in Toronto. I think he's been bought into the new coach. He wants to fit in with the new group. And I think after a slow start to the season, his game is rounding back into form. He's shooting the three a lot better as well. And he's been a pretty prolific one-on-one scorer who can also set up other guys when he draws extra attention in the post. But yeah, I mean, it has been a surreal road trip for him. I mean, every single team he lands in, whether it's Sacramento, there was a flurry of reporting around, oh my God, Masai is talking to Alvin Gentry. Is there something happening right there? And of course, that was short-lived, and it seems like, Sacramento may not want to pay 3 max guys. And then they go to Golden State the next night, and you see a lot of reporting with Pascal in Golden State. And then even going to LA, I mean, I don't think he's linked to either of those teams, but still, just being in the media capital where most of the agents are, it's like, of course, it would be the surreal scene. But yeah, from my understanding of the situation, is just Pascal remains committed to wanting to stay in Toronto. And I don't think that those assurances will be given to teams looking to trade for him, that he will commit to those situations. Maybe when talks get more and more serious and we're closer to the trade deadline, they can sort of confront that. But at least of my knowledge right now, that hasn't been done. Like, other teams haven't come to them and said, like, will you trade for us? And will you sign here if you trade for me? So yeah, until I guess that barrier is reached, I think that, they're just going to continue fielding offers.
So I got a Siakam question.
Yeah.
What's the ideal fit for Siakam? So Anunoby gets traded, and part of the reason there's so much noise around OG Anunoby I feel like since 1976, although when you account for the exchange rate, it's like 1982. But
very good.
But part of the reason, you've definitely never heard that joke. But
no.
So since part of the reason there's so much noise around Anunoby is because he's a wonderful off-ball player. He's automatic in the corners. He guards every position. He's one of the best players, the absolute top tier best players in the league. You put on your team and you're going to change something about either your offense or defense because they're so good, right? Mm-hmm. So like you get Jokic and you're going to change your offense because you have Nikola Jokic. Like you're going to play differently around him. And Anunoby, and then there are guys who are either bad or have a bad trait on one side of the ball. You have to change things about your offense or defense to accommodate that. And Anunoby's one of the best players in the league who you can drop onto any team in the league, and you don't have to change anything with your offensive or defensive ecosystem in order to fit him, and he's going to make you better on both sides. And that's part of the reason why a midseason trade for him always made a ton of sense for me, and why I felt like a lot of teams could have justified trying to go after him. Indiana could justify going after him. The Kings could have justified going after him. A million other teams could have justified going after him. Siakam in a vacuum is a better player, but he's also not as accommodatable of a player, right? Especially as a shooter, where the 3-point shot is like the last 4 years now, he's like a 31, 32% 3-point shooter. And he is a little bit more of a ball dominant guy than OG. What do you look at? It's different when you come in the offseason, you have a training camp to get an offense together, to get a defense together, to get acclimated with your teammates, to figure out how it's all going to work. It's different when it comes in the middle of the season. What do you see as the ideal fit for him, let's say in a world where we know he's not in Toronto this year?
I mean, I think what I'm going to push back on is I don't think he needs to be the number one option to be effective. Last time we've seen Pascal Siakam as a number two option, the Raptors won the championship in 2019. And that's not to give Pascal the headline credit there. Obviously, that was Kawhi, and the rest of the team was really good as well. But Pascal was really good on number two role. I think that there's a lot of focus on the three-point shooting, and that's fair. That is typically how players who don't have the ball contribute. But Pascal is a pretty well-rounded player. I mean, he's a strong rebounder. When he's locked in defensively, he has a really, really good gear there. I would say he's a stronger on-ball defender than off-ball defender, especially right now. But, you know, when it comes time to it, I've seen him defend at a high level in the playoffs multiple times. And then, yeah, in terms of his scoring, it depends on what kind of team you need. I mean, I think that if you're looking to find more balance, especially somebody who can score on the block, who can generate his own offense, you know, I'm thinking about, yeah, I mean, ideally he plays alongside a stretch five. So teams that have a stretch five could really use Pascal as a four. And it just balances out, you know, how much creating you can get from, you know, your secondary star. I mean, I think for Pascal, like it would be a bit of a different, like I agree with you that it's not as seamless as bringing in OG and he's plug and play 3 and D. You don't have to worry about him. He's going to put him on your opposing team's best player and he's going to shut him down. It's not like that. But at the same time, I think he raises your ceiling if you are a team right now that has like one star, but you know, you get to the playoffs and they really lock in on that guy. Who else can generate offense for you? Those are the type of teams that should be looking at Pascal because all of a sudden you bring a lot more balance to your group.
See, this is why I keep coming back to the Pacers.
Exactly.
You got about them, yeah.
You got your stretch five, Miles Turner. He brings them some more defense. Lord knows they could use anybody to defend. He can play in a high pace. He's good in transition, good cutter. Like it just makes a ton of sense. He gives them length. He gives them another reliable option to create a shot other than Halliburton. If Halliburton is, you know, shut down in a playoff series or quintuple teamed or something on any given play, which really might happen at some point soon.
Yeah.
And the Pacers, by the way, have had interest in Siakam for a long time. Like before they traded Sabonis, there were some Sabonis Siakam discussions there too. Like that dates back a while, this Pacers front office being interested in Siakam. So that's one that I'm like, okay, that could be.
Well, let me dovetail from that, guys. Since I'm the guy who's based near Sacramento, you've got this, you know, subplot where obviously Domas goes to the Kings. You know, all those years that we saw Domas next to Miles Turner and some of the complications that came with that pairing. You know, how, if it went the other way, would you feel about Pascal and this Kings offense where it's so much, you know, high ball action with Domas and the guards coming off the cuts and Pascal having to find his way within that? What would you think about that fit?
I don't think it's as clean as it is in Indiana. I don't. I think one thing that you would really want to see from Pascal is, look, it's fine if you're not the strongest off-ball shooter. Like he's totally fine if you put him in the corners and things like that. It's just not the best way to use him. But then you probably need to be really, really good at cutting or really, really good at screening to create space for other people off the ball. There's other ways to play off ball. It's not just catching and shooting from three. And I don't think that, and he would probably take up similar spaces to Sabonis. I do think that he would boost their transition game. There's no doubt. In a half-court setting, you can give the ball to Pascal and he could score and generate a good shot for you. There's a lot of other shooting around, you know, the Kings. But yeah, I think what's difficult there is just finding value for the Raptors that doesn't really include Keegan Murray. Like I just, you know, I'm looking at the rest of the Kings roster and, you know, you can maybe cobble together something with like Davion Mitchell. I mean, the Raptors already have quickly now, so you're at best trading for a backup point guard for you. Herter, who's had a kind of up and down kind of year, and then maybe some picks. It just doesn't seem like that clean of a fit. Plus, on court, I do think that it's not as easy to fit him into Sacramento, but totally agree. Indiana seems like the spot. I mean, I think Toronto would like a lot of players from their side. Like you throw in a Jarris Walker. I don't know if they want to throw in, you know, Buddy Hield. You're starting with something there. You know, Andrew Nembhard's I guess I just mentioned that they don't need another point guard, but he can play two guard. He's Canadian, you know.
Yeah,
so.
The Buddy one's interesting because, you know, let's not forget the way the season started. Buddy was you know, sending the bad signal up that he wanted out of town, and obviously things have gone better than he probably thought, and he's played well and fit in well. But yeah, we'll see what happens on the Kings front. You know, and I wrote about this yesterday. You know, they now have to face the even more complicated dynamic of of knowing that Pascal's not real excited about the prospect of going to Sacramento. That's going to have a ripple effect on what they're willing to put on the table, obviously, because it seems very clear that it's a rental situation, with no long-term future being probable, if you will. So we shall see. William, thank you for coming on the show, brother.
Just let the Pistons offer everything.
Oh
Pistons
my God.
offer everything.
That's
Get
how
them
we're
to
gonna do
5 wins.
That's how we're gonna do the last champion for the Raptors from 2019. Our last piece. Enjoy Detroit,
Come
buddy.
on, Masai. Don't do that to him. Don't do that to him, Masai.
He'll get him their 5th win. They'll build a statue.
Oh my Lord. You guys, are we really gonna have James Wiseman, Marvin Bagley, and Pascal Siakam going to where big men go to die? Let's not do this. We cannot do this.
Come on.
All right,
man.
William, we're shifting to Clippers. It was great having you on. We'd love to have you on again sometime. Say hi to Blake for us. Thank you for the time, brother. Appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me on.
Be good. All right, Mr. Katz, we keeping it moving today. I like this. We got NBA headquarters in the house. We are going coast to coast from Toronto to the city of Angels. La Murray, Clippers beat writer, coming at us. I assume is that a LAX background?
Yes, LAX background, man. LAX shouldn't even be like real LA. Like I hate this airport with a fiery passion.
Hey, relax there, Law. I got one recommendation for you because I was there yesterday. Go to Riley's in Terminal 1. Get yourself a Bloody Mary. It's like a meal and a drink all in one, and you'll feel a little bit better. You'll be okay. They got good Bloody Marys over there.
See, if my bag flew free today, would do that. But I'm at American, and I'm already dragging all the delays to my next stop. So, shout out to Memphis. I can't wait to get to the city, but getting to the city, it is the worst. It is the absolute worst.
All right. Well, listen, hopefully we can help you pass the time a little bit.
I'm happy to be here, by the way. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see you guys. I'm having a great morning.
Good. I mean, it's better than having a bump with folks in the terminal. So we'll give you a few minutes apiece here. Let's talk about your Clippers. I saw them the other night fall to the Lakers and save Darvin Ham's job. Not really, but it felt that way that night. But as we know now, Darvin I think is okay for a little while. But man, the Clips are humming even with that loss notwithstanding. And to go from losing 5 or 6 in a row like they did at the beginning of the James Harden era to, Russell Westbrook going to the bench, things starting to click and to figure it out. I'm trying to get the final tally at this point. Let's see. They were 8-10. Now they're 24-13. My basic math says that's 16 out of 19. They look good, brother. What do you think is working so well for them right now?
Shoot, you can take it back even further, like literally from the time that Russ went to the second unit to make James unit point guard undisputed, to get a guy who doesn't need touches at all and Terrence Mann in the starting lineup. They are the best team in the NBA record wise, 21-6. And in that time, they have shot above the break from 3 at a 40% rate, which is all-star level shots. Like, we're not talking about the shots that, are created for role players or whatever. No, we're talking about Kawhi, Paul George, James Harden are, they're pulling up, taking the hardest 3-pointers that are available, and they're smashing them efficiently. And that is a credit to just the fact that they are playing together, that they have figured it out, that they understand that James is going to have his ball screens, and Kawhi is going to get into his mid-range area, and Paul's going to his ISOs, and those guys are really clicking together on the offensive side of the basketball. I think that was the biggest issue when James got there. They try to have him be off ball. They try to have Russell Westbrook and James share point guard duties, and that was rocky. It was taken away from everybody. It was less than the sum of the parts.
Right.
Everybody understands what their role is, and they can better. That's the thing about it. Sam, you saw one of their worst performances, and some of that was logistics. Some of that was just the travel catching up to them. Get used to it. We're not going to be comfortable here traveling for pretty much the rest pre-All-Star break period of the season. But with that said, they're in that before the losses they had to take lessons from losing streaks and bad losses. Now they're taking lessons from some of their blowout wins, and that's a good place to be.
Real quick before Fred jumps in, because I buried the news, they obviously extend Kawhi Leonard. Didn't necessarily see that happen in 3 years, $150 million, about the same pay rate that Fred has at the Athletic. What do we think about the stability and security that comes with that? Because you got the new arena coming next year. You got Kawhi, who, by the way, is never very revealing in media by his standards in that press conference, for him to very kind of, plainly state that he believes that this will lead to James Harden and Paul George also having new contracts at some point. Showed you what the internal messaging is. Is this just kind of all systems go with this particular group? Is that what that extension signaled?
Here's the thing, Kawhi, I feel like he's very direct and forthcoming about what he wants and who he wants to be around and who he wants to be with. When he signed his contract in 2021, which was coming off of an ACL tear, and I wrote this, everyone assumed before the ACL he was just going to sign a one so that he could maximize his earnings. If he signs a 3-year deal to match up with Paul George's 3-year deal that he extended just before the 2021 season, and he explained on media day, the only time we saw him that whole year because he was recovering from injuries, that he didn't want people like me about whether or not Kawhi was going to come and play or whether he's going to opt out of his contract while he wasn't out there. He wanted to have that be as less a distraction as possible. Now you have a situation where Kawhi has always taken his free agency into the offseason. He's always opted out. He bucked that trend this time. And he basically was like, yeah, I want to be here and I want my guys to be here. And so I'm taking a lot of money. We're getting this done now. And if that minimizes things, great. But as far as him being the best player, being the culture builder, if you will, it's a interesting culture, but it's a positive one, considering where this franchise was even in the Lob City era. And so it surprised me. I was literally in shoot around watching this dude, get shots up. Now I can put my camera down by Kawhi because that's what he likes to do in the practice facility. And then I can't even get on the freeway until they drop the news. So definitely not expected as far as the timing. But I think everyone expected that Kawhi was going to wind up sticking around with this franchise.
So, Law, I'm asking the natural follow-up to that.
Yo, let me get $5 first, Fred. Like Sam said, you got money.
I mean, look at that haircut. Of course he got money. Hey, Law, do me a few favors. We do this and hit that mute button while Fred's going, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Thanks, brother.
Law, you know how you get $150 million? You don't hand it out to people on Zooms. That's exactly how. I got to ask you the natural follow-up question, which is, so what's next for Paul George? Because Kawhi, as you said, hinted at there potentially being something next for Paul George. What is next for Paul George? And if PG re-ups, if and when Harden re-signs this summer, what's the future of this team look like if they don't get to where they want to go? Because one thing that I feel like we have to concentrate on that should not be overlooked is that for the past half decade, the questions about the Clippers have never, ever been about talent. They've never been about execution. They haven't been about coaching. We can all agree that Ty Lue does a wonderful job there. They have been about, are the good players going to play in the games that they need to win? And so far this year, all those guys are playing. Kawhi is playing every single night. All those guys are playing, and this team is incredibly good. And if they continue to play, they can win a title. Why not? If it goes awry, or if it doesn't go awry, how does that shake up how they handle their future beyond those three players?
I think that's the biggest question that everyone's going to wind up having as far as the success of this season and going into next season. With Paul, though, I think the deal winds up getting done with Paul George just because he is the guy who came here with Kawhi. They want to stay together. He's from here too. They have almost the exact same priorities, except it's even more urgent for him because unlike Kawhi, he doesn't have a trophy or two in his case. He doesn't have a ring. So I think it's pretty simple for Paul. I think complicated is with James because it's always complicated with James. James is here because he didn't sign his deal. He sacrificed with Philadelphia. He left the Brooklyn Nets when things in Brooklyn were looking haywire, as far as the stability of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, both with health and extracurricular activity. James can't be extended right now. They can't talk NBA Finals. Will the Clippers be in the NBA Finals? We ain't never seen that before. So who knows what that's going to look like? I know that Paul, he has a little bit more of flexibility control of his situation. Paul even has a player option. James doesn't even have that. So that's going to be the swing factor. I think Paul is not complicated. James is. And James wants his money. James wants to be an all-star. James, he wants to have the team success as well. That's why he's here. He's making this team click when things didn't look like it would be like that. Well, this day 2 months ago, I remember this day 2 months ago, I was in Philly watching teams on my computer smacked in Dallas. So like they were completely the opposite of what they are now. And so everything is about what's going to happen with James as far as, what can go wrong or how drastic can things change. But that's the thing. It's like Kawhi, he's talked to James too. And as of, you have not heard James make any waves. And who knows, again, this is January when the All-Star stuff comes out by the end of this month, going into February, maybe that changes. But as of right now, James has been very focused and no real change there until we see how this thing ends up in the spring in the playoffs.
Good stuff, man. I'm dying to see where they go on the court, guys, because they look so good. And you do have, I know it's cliche, but I'm a sucker for a little bit of legacy talk. And like you said, Law, Kawhi's already checked that box. Paul has not. James has not. They got a lot on the line. And then you add in this incredibly unique dynamic with a, intra-city rival, element with the Lakers. They're finally getting out from underneath their shadow with the new arena next year. Steve Ballmer, one of the richest dudes on the planet, deciding if he wants to cut this massive check for all three of these guys. That context is going to make their playoff run a whole lot of fun to watch. And we certainly look forward to you covering it, Law. We are going to keep it moving, I believe. And apologies for the – jump in. What do you got?
I got just one more thing to watch for. Tyronn Lue is going to – damn sure better by the Clippers, but if it ain't by the Clippers, it's going to be by somebody. He noticed that Eric Spoelstra got his extension. He saw last summer what Monty got. He saw what Greg Popovich got, as his extension. He's praised all those guys. He's expecting Steve Kerr, one or the other to get his bag if he wants to be there. Things are so much better for Tyronn Lue as far as how he feels about who he's working with, and the health of all those guys has put him in a much better place as well. He is deserving. He has 1 year left on his deal after this season. I don't know when that gets done. I don't know how it gets done. Something's going to get done. He's absolutely looking forward to that as well.
That's fantastic. So you don't see that going into next year? You think that gets done this summer at the latest?
I can't say about when, but I knew that T. Lue's going to get the bag, and it's going to be interesting to see how much.
Right.
Really interesting trend in the NBA. It's a great point, Law. Coaches are like really getting paid. There was, and our colleague, Dave DeFore, I'm going to credit him because he made this point to me when we were talking on the phone a few weeks ago. NBA salaries have risen like crazy over the past decade with the infusion of money and the rising salary cap and all of that. And a lot of front office contracts have risen with that. Coaching salaries have not risen proportionately with player salaries. And so what you end up happening is you have coaches who are making like less than the minimum guys in some cases, or around what the minimum guys are making in some cases. And they're having to basically act as a boss to a bunch of players. And that can be harder. But when you have a guy who's now all of a sudden making a ton of money, I mean, Monty's contract with the Pistons really set the market. Popovich immediately gets that extension, like Law said, and now Eric Spoelstra gets $120 million. I mean, he's making almost as much as I am. It's really changing It's changing the
That's the
market.
takeaway. I'm just so happy that NBA media salaries have gone up proportionally.
Oh yeah, totally, 100%. Yeah. Journalism's not completely and utterly in shambles. Everyone's doing great. Newspapers are doing amazing.
All
They're
right, settle
expanding.
down.
So we're I just think it's a really interesting trend. I think it's going to continue to happen. I don't think these contracts, I don't think everyone's going to get Spoelstra money because Eric Spoelstra is Eric Spoelstra. But I do think we are going to see coaching salaries rise. And it's something that I've even thought about with the guy that I cover, Tom Thibodeau, who is going to be in the same situation as Ty Lue next summer. And I've wondered if the Knicks are like, crap, if we're going to keep him, we really should have extended him before all these other contracts came out, because now we're going to have to pay through the nose, aren't we?
No doubt. I mean, that Frank Vogel comes to mind with the Suns. You know, he probably wishes he did something post Monty. That's a good thing for another day, gentlemen, that we'll dive into all things coaching, economics. Law, we're going to let you get back to the amazing LAX experience. Safe travels to Memphis. Hopefully you have fewer than 3 stops and get some barbecue when you get there. Appreciate you, brother. We are now going to go to chapter 4 of this very fast-paced, entertaining pod. At least that's my subjective opinion. Yet again, we got John Krasinski from Minnesota on the line. We need to talk some Timberwolves and how, Johnny, you know, a couple of weeks back, I wrote about them when they came through my part of the country with the obvious question of, are they for real? You know, at that time, my feeling was, I think so. They looked pretty legitimate and substantive, and the timing for that question to kind of come up again is great because as losses go, comporting yourself the way they did last night in an overtime defeat to the Celtics is about as good as it gets. First of all, how the hell are you, my friend? And what's the word?
Yeah, I'm good. Good to see you guys. You know, it's interesting the way that you frame that, Sam, because I think you're right. There has been, especially early on in the season, you're wondering, can this last? Can they keep it up? You know, is this for real? And there was a period maybe a couple of weeks ago where they started to kind of drop a couple of games, and you're wondering if the other shoe is kind of going to drop now, and the Wolves are coming back to earth. But really over the last few games now, and especially that Boston one last night where they don't have Rudy Gobert, they don't have Mike Conley, they still probably should have won that game and ended up losing in overtime to Boston. I do think that they feel like they have rediscovered some of the things that helped get them to where they are, which is number one in the West. And I think they've been there for 54 days now in a row, which is just pretty remarkable for this franchise's long history of futility.
They are, I will qualify, you know, you mentioned the little bit of a downturn. They're 6-5 in the last 11. You know, to hear you talk about them rediscovering things, I think you've already kind of answered this question, but you know, did they grow during that time? Do you think? Did they steady the ship? And the way you're kind of hitting on it is that they're forging ahead with that same identity and confidence at this point, or was that, you know, do any red flags remain from that little stretch?
Well, I would say, yeah, they just finished last night was a run of 16 straight games against teams with winning records, and I think 11 of those games were on the road. So it was a really tough stretch, and they went 9-7 during that stretch. So I do think that I wanted to use that window of games to really evaluate what their potential is for the rest of the season. And I do think that given that they were able to come out of it with a winning record, you still feel pretty good about their chances in the West. Now, one thing that they absolutely are continuing to work on is finding some consistency offensively. They've been a great defensive team all season long, number 1, number 2 in the West all year, or excuse me, in the league all year. But their offense is kind of really stagnated right around, you know, 18th, 19th in the league in efficiency. And so a lot of the problems with the offense have been turnover related, and they're trying to figure out, you know, how to iron out those mistakes and kind of get more of a flow offensively so that they're a little more balanced. They know they can't be number 1 in defense and 20th in offense if they want to win in the playoffs. They have to get that offense up near the top 10 level which is realistic given the talent that they have, but it has been a sticking point for most of this season.
Yeah, and it's not just the turnovers too, right? Like they don't really offensive rebound how you would expect a team that's constructed on size to offensive rebound, and they lose the possession game on more nights than not. I was going to ask an offensive question too, because so they're 19th right now in points per possession. And when Mike Conley is going well, they can look really good. And sometimes when Conley doesn't have it, they kind of look like they're running in mud, is I think the better way to put it. Are they too reliant on Mike Conley? And if so, is that something the organization is concerned about? How are they looking to alleviate that? Are they looking to lean on the other guys who they already have, Ant and those guys more? Are they going to look for outside help? What do you see happening there?
Yeah, I mean, I think the good news is that Mike Conley's been largely great for this season, but he is 36 years old. He just, he sat out the game against Boston. And remember, guys, they flew on the day of the game to Boston and still really put up a fight. And so that was, I think, pretty good considering that Rudy and Mike are the two kind of safety blankets in terms of late game offense. When it gets stagnant, you have Mike and Rudy in the pick and roll, and that creates good offense for them some way, somehow. And so I do think that there is a correlation. When Mike Conley is playing very well, they look about as good as most teams in the league. When he is not playing well, they have a hard time pivoting away from it and finding other ways to get really good offense. What you see more often than not with them on nights that he's off is the ball really sticking, a lot of ISO, a lot of forced shots, and then you have Edwards driving into traffic and sometimes turning the ball over and taking tough shots. Karl-Anthony Towns doing the same thing. So that's what they're trying to work through. And so I do think that the organization, Tim Conley, is absolutely looking at, as the trade deadline approaches, some options to try to give them more juice coming off of the bench behind Mike Conley, because they don't really have another point guard behind him. Jordan McLaughlin's a nice player, but he is not going to be one that steps in and plays heavy minutes, either if Conley is injured or out, or just if he's struggling on that particular night. So I do think you'll look for, they are looking at adding a ball handler, adding a shooter to to give them some more space in the offense and to maybe be able to run things more efficiently than just relying on the superior individual talents of Towns and Edwards. They can do it, but it's kind of not a recipe for consistent success offensively.
John, this week, it comes out that Netflix has an interesting documentary series. What are they calling it again, by the way? Remember the title?
I don't remember the title of it, but it's just like the quarterback, right?
It's the play caller. Sorry, that's our podcast. Apologies. But it's a NBA focused 5 guys behind the scenes. Anthony Edwards is one of them. What struck me about that is a couple things. For one, as a guy who has a soft spot for small markets, I kind of love that Minnesota and Sacramento are both in there because Domantas Sabonis is also featured. But it also is the latest reminder that the Minnesota Timberwolves are Anthony Edwards' team. And, the dynamics that I found so interesting and that I did write about a little while back was, how does Cat feel about that? How does Rudy fit into this? That train is going to keep, chugging down that track in terms of Ant being the man here. Are those dynamics just, as steady as can be and still as good as they were before? Maybe even better at this point in terms of just the human part of these guys figuring it out?
Yeah, I mean, I think first and foremost, when you win at the level that they've won at, it kind of validates everything that they've been doing. And so it's hard for people to complain about roles, about things like anything like that when you're first in the West and when things are going well. The other thing about that makes it, I think, easier for the Timberwolves is that Anthony Edwards is a very charismatic, easy to like dude in the locker room. And I think a lot of the guys really respect him for the way that he works, for the way that he relates to everyone. And even on those nights when he maybe gets a little bit too aggressive and tries to put too much on his shoulders, it's more of a case of viewed as, he's so talented and these are mistakes of ambition than anything else. And Edwards himself is very coachable. And when he makes mistakes, he acknowledges them, he apologizes for them, and he does kind of, take accountability. And so all of those things do help that process go forward smoothly. But I do think we are seeing a point in the season right now, just a little window into him still being a 22-year-old. I mean, last night in Boston, he was in the fourth quarter and overtime. He was 1 for 7 with 3 turnovers. And as they just needed a couple of more buckets to close that thing out, maybe there was an ill-advised shot here or there. Maybe there was a bad turnover. And so you have Chris Finch, you have Mike Conley, especially constantly sort of reminding him and emphasizing to him the importance of moving the ball, trusting that it'll come back to you, and kind of working through the impatience of youth. And no one, everyone kind of understands what he is going through, and the mistakes that he does make are just kind of come with the territory of being a young star and a young go-to player. But at the same time, I do think that these veterans are really trying to really drill into him that if he just stays within the offense and plays team basketball, that it'll be better for him and for everyone else. And so it's a work in progress that way. But in terms of chemistry, in terms of pecking order and leadership and all of those things, it's been really good that way for the entire season.
John, are we going to get a 5,000 word feature from you if Naz Reid goes 50, 40, 90?
I mean, 5,000 words wouldn't even cover it. I mean, it'd be a couple chapters.
You'd have to do 3 chapters,
a 3-part series.
One that's 50,000 words, one that's 40,000 words, and one that's 90,000 words. Just
that's
to
right.
Keep it on theme.
We'll do it. Yeah. It's been great. He's super fun. But you look at, he's so talented. I mean, I really do believe it that he belongs in the 6th man of the year category race, just given the success of the team and how important he is to that second unit. But his shooting from 3, and he shoots 40% from 3 at a decent volume coming off. He's not just taking 1 or 2 a game. He's letting it rip. And he is supremely talented offensively with the handle, with the shooting, with the post game. So it's been critical to what they've done. But 50, 40, 90 is surprising everyone around here, even. That's for sure.
He's also, you got to help me understand the Timberwolves fans' proclivity for Naz reading the hell out of our comments section. Any Timberwolves story that gets published, there's real reaction, and then there's about half of it is Naz Reid in the comments. Is that just Naz Reid love? Is that all that is?
Totally. He's a cult hero here. You need to be in Target Center, guys, when he gets introduced. When he comes in,
is it Bobby Portis levels?
It's Bobby Portis level. Okay. Absolutely. It's he is a central figure in here. And I do think what the biggest thing, you say, why does Naz Reid resonate so much with this fan base? And I do think that they look at Naz Reid as just a trophy for them in terms of he was undrafted, comes in and has developed into what he has today. And I think that forever the Timberwolves franchise was always viewed as one that never really found the diamond in the rough, that that would even with their high draft picks, they'd botch those and it wouldn't work out. Well, here is a case where, credit to Gerson Rosas, who was here previously and signed him undrafted the year that he came out. And then credit to Naz Reid, who has reshaped his body, who has, kind of really honed his game and worked his butt off to become, this player who is so talented, but also you can tell just wears his heart on his sleeve and plays so damn hard every single night. And so it just makes him unbelievably popular here in Minnesota. There's a pizza place just a few blocks away from where I live, and there's a sign outside that says "honk if you love Naz Reid," and people are honking all the time.
You're honking, John. Don't pretend you're not honking.
Absolutely, why not? But yeah, so I mean, that just kind of tells you there's all sorts of those little anecdotes about what he means to this fan base, and they just see him as kind of a view of, hey, the organization finally accomplished something and did the smart thing and the hard work thing by finding this guy who every other team could have had and missed on. And he's a Timberwolves guy and he's their guy. And so yeah, he's just, it's Naz Reid is a meme. It's a call. It's a siren call, whatever you want to call it. And it's a movement. Yeah. So it's a honk.
It's a honk.
It's a honk.
Exactly.
I just love the idea that John is home, peaceful by himself. Finally works 90 hours a week covering the Timberwolves, going around the country and getting up early and going to bed late and pulling all-nighters, and finally he gets a second to rest. And just as his head hits the bed, and just as he's about to go to sleep, he hears this loud honk, and it's Naz Reid keeping him up every night.
That's it. You know, hey, I've been waiting for stuff like this for 20 years, so why not, you know?
So within that, and on a less lighthearted note, more business question for you. This is an unanswerable question that I'll ask anyway, just to get your perspective. Naz Reid represents the perceived tipping point when they gave him this current deal of kind of the question of, good God, how much money are they going to give to big guys? And what does that do to the luxury tax down the road? And now, because really most of us did not see this level of play coming, now, a question that we didn't think would be on the table is going to be on the table, which is, how far does this team have to go in order for this, new ownership group of Alex Rodriguez and Mark Lore to just take that big old gulp and say, okay, we're just going to pay for everything? I mean, do they have to win the whole thing? Do they have to get to the finals? What do you think the point of view is there?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and it is unanswerable because we just have not yet seen Mark Lore and Alex Rodriguez in action in terms of from a, being the number one guys, the controlling owners yet. They've been very active in terms of working with Glenn Taylor to make moves. They were on the front end of the Rudy Gobert trade. They were on the front end of the Tim Connolly hire and paying the big money that he got to come here. So they have shown an aggressiveness in wanting to spend money, but it's not been all of their money yet. And it's about to be, in right around March, April, assuming that they get approved by the NBA and all of those things. And so until you're in that spot and in that seat, it's hard to really gauge what they're going to do. But the way that I view it is, it's a good problem for them to have, because like you said, Sam, we did not know when they signed Naz Reid, you're like, man, they are giving Rudy Gobert a max deal. They have Karl Anthony Towns on a max deal, and now Naz Reid is getting $15 million a year. How is that going? How are they going to work? Allocating that much financial resources to their front court. And the good news for them is that the three of those guys have all played very well together, and they've found a way to be successful with this unconventional roster construction. But I do think that anyone would have to say that the deeper the playoff run, the better for these guys, because they have to generate some revenue to help with the second apron, to help with the luxury tax. I think, though, guys, big picture, I can see them, if they go deeper into the playoffs, Western Conference Finals, NBA Finals, this group trying to keep them together, at least for the short haul here, because not only do they want to win at a very high level, but I think you're going to start to hear questions about a new arena and all of those things. And so the more you win now, the more support you can kind of build up for a new project that might come down the pike in 5-6 years, something like that. And so I do believe they see a window that is open for contention right now, and they're going to be aggressive going for that. But, it's easy for me to say it's not my money to spend.
Great stuff, John. Great stuff, Fred. Appreciate you both. I will say on the back end here, John is always a must read, but this week, people should go out of their way to go read his piece on Ricky Rubio, who kind of quietly retired this week, relatively speaking. And Ricky's a guy that is always going to spark flashbacks for me when the Kings worked him out in that. What year was that when he came out, John?
2009 was when he was drafted. Yep.
Yeah, people forget, man. The hype was just through the roof for Ricky coming out of Spain. I took a lot of pride in the fact that I landed one of the first interviews with him. He comes through Sacramento, and the late Dan Fagan, his agent at the time, had kind of orchestrated this interview where I felt like I was going to interview one of the Beatles. I'm not trying to be hyperbolic, but like they were guiding me through back doors to get into the hotel room, and you had to keep it quiet and not tell anybody. It's just, he was a massive star coming in, obviously dealt with injury early in his career, and you captured it well in the column, John, how like that spark, it never died completely, but it was never the same as it was that first year. Dude had vision for days, and a hell of a smile, and the alliteration on his name, and a very kind soul, a guy who was real open with the public and the fans when he lost his mother, and mental health wise now is been real open about what he's going through. So all the best to Ricky. Go read John's column. As always, appreciate you, brother. Guys, thanks for doing this. This was fun. We'll talk to everybody next week.